of electronic stimulus. We are a generation apparently trained for a very short concentration span and a desperate need for digital company.
Ross Cameron on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
It's been said that when someone you love has Parkinson's, you have Parkinson's. The truth is, Parkinson's disease doesn't just affect the diagnosed. It affects everyone who supports and helps care for them. Worldwide, over 10 million people are living with Parkinson's, a neurological disease that affects movement. And with so many places to search for information, it can be difficult to know where to begin. The Parkinson's Foundation has answers. Answers for everyone in the fight. We can help you understand the disease, help you find expert care, give you tips for living a better life, share the latest research, help you find local support, and there's a free helpline you can call. Find your answers and join us in the fight against Parkinson's. To learn more, please go to parkinson.org or call 1-800-4PD-INFO. The Parkinson's Foundation. Better lives together.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's News Talk.
News and information.
TNT Radio.
Welcome back to Unleashed on TNT Radio. All right, this is Mark Morano with your host, and we're joined here now by Denzil Wessels, the founder of Dymium, a leading innovator in data security and access solutions, and helps organizations harness the power of AI, artificial intelligence-driven data access policies. Welcome to the program, Denzil.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me.
All right. Tell us a little bit about what your company does as it relates to artificial intelligence, AI, and where you see this whole issue currently at the moment, whether we should be afraid or not afraid of AI.
Look, Mark, I think everyone should be a little bit cautious. One of the things that we're focused in is, if you think of, what is AI? AI is a neural network of a bunch of information that allows people to query it to on their queries. And what's interesting is how it's actually created. Companies take the data that they have, they strip out every notion of access control and security, and it's really boiled down to, think of numbers. What you hear about coefficients, it's boiled down to a number and a word, and it creates a mathematical relationship between the different words that are out there. And so when people go to consume it, there's no security, there's no concept of who should have access to what kind of information. So our company focuses on reconstituting that security to protect the data for the different organizations.
Okay,
now,
so yeah, go ahead.
Your question of, should we be concerned? I think absolutely. Look, we're all learning about AI right now. And I think the biggest thing that we have to worry about is, what is the sensitive information that we're giving to these AI solutions that can be used against us? So I think we should be a little bit cautious dipping our toe into the water.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is it seems as though for AI to be intelligent, the amount of data mining and the amount of data it needs to collect on us. Here's an example. People anecdotally swear it's true. Can you confirm it right now? When I was talking about, I think it was a lawnmower a couple of weeks ago, and then talking, not on my phone, not on my computer, in the room. And then later you go and you see lawnmower ad on your AOL inbox or something like that. Is that just anecdotal, or is there actually any science to that? Or if you do a search for something, do you immediately get the ads? Is that part of AI? Is that the idea of tailoring everything to you to bring it to you, or is that not considered AI?
Absolutely. I mean, AI at its core is something that is associating a whole bunch of words. And you think about it's important to understand language. So when you see something like that happen, there's an engine that is collecting speech and taking the words and associating it to its set of words that it knows to understand what you're looking at and what your intent is. And companies are absolutely going to use that information to target you. And obviously that's the sales business side of it is, hey, let's target Mark with the lawnmower ad because he's talking about lawnmowers. But then there's also the potentially negative side where bad guys can, use information to target you. And typically, when there's malicious things that happen on the outside, it's usually going after the human and, the human in that loop. So understanding that, Mark is looking for lawnmowers, what about if I was using that to fish you to, have a company call you, say, hey, you've won a free lawnmower, just give us this information, We'll ship the lawnmower. So it can be very targeted. Absolutely.
Well, like this information, they click when you go to a website and it says accept all cookies, reject all cookies. Is that part of the AI information monster? Should you accept those cookies on a website or should you reject them? The average person, surfing the web.
Yeah, so cookies are related to storing information on your machine, right? It's a breadcrumb that companies can use to gather information about you. So if you look at, there's different laws, CPRA, GDPR, and everything that dictate about how you can store cookies. So companies have been forced to say, hey, do you want to accept these cookies or not? And there's functional things that make websites work, but then there's the targeted ad-based side of it that gathers information. And that is shared between a lot of other companies so that they can gather that information and target you as an individual.
Well, it also seems like, I can't remember, I don't want to mention company names, but whether it's a banking company, whether it's some kind of consumer, there's always some kind of hack at some point where they say, our data was breached. We are so sorry. We're working on the problem. We're containing it. You may or may, your sensitive information may not have been. What is that all about? Is that part of the competitive war for AI in the information warfare? Who's hacking this information? Do black market people hack it and then resell it to someone else for some profit and it's completely illegal? How do you explain? I just saw that about a week ago. One of my company, I can't remember if it was PayPal or some company, someone's always getting hacked, sensitive information, and they're always being forced to send out emails and disclosing it. Is that part of the AI info warfare?
I think it's something that's existed just around securing data. One of the things that has existed in the technology and security space is the lack of data security. And when I say lack of data security, everyone's heard about firewalls and, protecting against advanced threats. But as an industry, we've never built things that safeguard and hide data. So the risk we've always had is, can someone get inside the door, inside my company, whether through, hacking in or through simple social engineering? Hey, I'm Bill with accounting. Give me your, I need this information to look at this. That's typically the fastest way in is through the human. And, the challenge is what can people to get access to once they're inside, once they have access to the data? Now, AI, if we pull it back to talking about AI is only as good as the data and the model, the data that it's been used to train the model. So if people are able to get, exfiltrate your data from the company, they can absolutely use it against you. And bad guys have figured this out. If you look at, we know about the public GPTs or generative AIs that are out there. Bad guys have their own flavor of that. They take that same information and create one for bad reasons that just doesn't have all the controls around it and all the safety features that the other vendors are trying to put.
Well, when I'm thinking like when Amazon, when you search for something and then all the related stuff, is that considered AI or is that just, or your TiVo, where if you record certain shows and it'll suggest other shows, is that a form of AI or is that just as old as data collection not really related to AI?
I think it's as old as data collection. I think we've heard the terms machine learning over the years that has kind of morphed into AI. It's all about finding patterns in data. AI has just made it a lot more efficient and has given us the ability to generate information as well. So not just consume information. So if you think of that example that you just gave was about, machine learning. I collected all this data around Mark. What can I understand about that data so that I can target you? The other side is, okay, hey, I've generated this with Mark. What else would Mark be interested in? So it can take patterns of other data for other people out there, say, hey, Mark's, was talking about lawnmowers. Hey, people that were interested in lawnmowers are also buying grass seed, for example. And maybe it will target you with grass seed. So it's kind of layers of technologies and techniques we've had in the past with new ways to generate additional information on top.
Wow. Well, my daughters have what you mentioned, Chat GPT on their Apple's phone, right? And they'll put in a couple terms and then the AI comes back with they'll say, write a letter expressing my disappointment about something. And the letters are all remarkably similar that come. It's the same breathy language. It's very artificial. It doesn't sound genuine. And it's all sort of long-winded and it's repeat phraseology. Now, maybe it's because of the input words they're putting in. but it's not very impressive in terms of like persuasion. But I guess if you were, say, write a research paper on King Henry incorporating the following documents, that's the ultimate form of AI for the young student today, right? That would be like, oh my gosh, I can have a research paper written instantly or a minute or less and not even have to do an ounce of research myself. Is that a big issue? And can schools, universities, teachers detect when something has the hand of AI in it, particularly like a research paper?
Yeah, I think that's a great example. In fact, I have something similar with my daughter. She had to write a graduation speech for, somebody else at her school. And so, I remember showing her look, you can use ChatGPT and it's going to create the most vanilla speech that everybody's going to be happy with, because it's taking the culmination of what is a good speech and it's creating the most common version of that. So it's going to hit the mark. Now, the challenge is what did you need to put in there that was different for you? It's a generic bland response for everybody. So, people want to tailor it. And because of that, it's actually easy to catch those kind of those, I don't want to say forgeries, but the GPT generated content. Now, there are solutions out there that can take, the content that was created, you can run it through and it can tell you if it came out of one of those generative AI models. But, if you think about that, trying to catch that, then somebody else just releases another solution that will go and rewrite the words so that it doesn't match, so that it hides the fact that was generated with AI. So it's kind of a challenge, of, how we're going to stay ahead of this. I think the right approach is teaching people how to use generative AI to be more productive. We actually did a study within our company. We took a software engineer's 30-day output, 30-day work output around a project. And we found that we could achieve that same output in about 8 hours using generative AI. So if you think about that productivity gain, I think it's unreasonable for people to say, well, don't use AI, you need creative mind. I think you want to be able to use these tools to add, your spin on top of it, because productivity goes through the roof. And, I think especially for companies not leveraging generative AI today, you're going to get left behind, because guess what? Your peers and other companies are. And if you look at it, if they're getting, a 60 to 80% productivity increase, if you don't step up and take advantage of it, you're probably going to get left behind. So there's even the risk of not using AI in business these days.
Interesting. Now, if I was just thinking, if I were a student today and I were using it, it probably has good facts. I would probably use that as a good way to data collect facts in one location, but I guess that's just sort of like an encyclopedia. But it's, let me think about the chess master. I can't remember, it's Gary Kasparov. He played like a master computer and lost. The computer beat like the world's greatest chess player at one point. This was decades ago. Is that considered AI? Because is chess so technical and scientific, or are they anticipating moves? And the question would be, in a situation like that, does the computer have specific input about his opponent, or is he just playing the game of chess, whoever happens to the opponent to be? That's, I don't know if you know the answer to that, but it's one of the things I've always been curious about.
I think, if we go back in time, right, machine learning, like we're talking about, morphed into AI, et cetera. It's a lot of techniques that we've been using for decades. They've just gotten a lot better. So, on the chess side, it's about figuring out all the moves that are possible off of a set of moves and kind of looking thousands of moves ahead to anticipate what could happen. Obviously, the more AI knows about its components, it can predict based on, hey, all your previous matches, you tend to respond this way. So it can find patterns that can use against it. So there is something to that where it depends on the data it's fed. Now, your mention of, kind of the facts piece and comparing it to an encyclopedia, that one kind of makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up a little bit, because AI can hallucinate too, right? So you hear about, model drift and those types of things. Those are AI kind of not getting the facts right and jumping to the wrong conclusions. And again, with it only being as good as the data that it's fed, right. I think people should be fact checking anything that comes out of these generative AIs. There was a legal case. I don't know if you heard about this one. A lawyer wanted to put a defense together for their case, so they went to GPT. They had it create their entire case defense. They ended up in front of a judge presenting it, and the judge looks at it, and the cases that AI made up were fabricated. They were false. It made up the cases too. So, and if you don't do your homework and check that one, you're going to be in kind of hot water when you go use it, right?
Yeah, well, this is silly, but I was watching The Adventures of Superman, 1952, George Reeves' old TV show with my son. And there was an episode about a robot named Mr. Kelso, who basically, they didn't use the phrase AI, but it was helping bank robbers. This robot in this wall of computers in the 1950s was helping these bank robbers rob banks. And it was like, okay, you have to go at 11:52. The guard takes a break at this time. He will leave. The money bag will arrive at the teller on the far left. And it was giving all this instruction. So in 1952, they had this version of AI. So, which brings up my question, what is the history of this whole movement? And again, distinguishing it just between general computer technology versus AI. What is the history of AI as it comes to this? Does this go back a century or just a few decades? Where does it begin?
You look, even if we go back, 15, 20 years, we've been using a lot of this techniques, at least in the security side, on how we detect threats from bad guys. How do we find malicious things? There's been a lot of patterns that have been used over time. Now, this whole concept of a neural network and how we connect it together, I actually have I have a book from a long time ago, and I was actually looking at it earlier this weekend. It was dated 1997, and it was about, understanding neural networks. So if we look at that was back in 97, we were talking about neural networks back then. We now have the compute and the ability to deal with these large mathematical models, and that's all AI is, really a mathematical model. We have the technology to run it now, if you will. And I think, when you hear about the memory or the look back, our ability to feed it a lot more data that it can use for lookup, it gets more powerful these days.
Okay, we have to take a break. This is Unleashed with Mark Moreno. We're going to continue our discussion with Denzil Wessels of Dymium on artificial intelligence. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Anticipate potential delays for the morning commute. In other news, a recent government report on prescription drug pricing points to corporate
Freedom of the press is about your right to know.
What
are you talking about, man? Look at his stats.
It's about your right to be informed. Your right to access all types of information keeps us free as a nation.
No.
Today, there are real threats to press freedom.
Residential areas
and your right to know about the world around us.
Look.
Some threats are obvious, some are easy to miss, but they all put our way of life at risk. We must defend against all of these threats, no matter what kind of news is important to you.
Justified putting American troops in harm's way?
That's a great question.
We must protect our right to know before it's too late. Understand the threats. ProtectPressFreedom.org.
From weather and traffic reports
to news of political developments,
we turn to journalists for the information we need to live our daily lives.
Journalists around the world provide the news that is essential for democracy,
for personal freedom, and for safety and stability.
Yet their ability to report freely and safely is under attack like never before.
Too many journalists are paying with their lives. They face exponential risks, and they've already paid a heavy toll.
Death threats, online harassment, and physical attacks
are becoming a daily experience of journalists in all countries.
We just want people to be safe, to be able to get our readers the information that they need to make informed decisions.
They checked my phone and realized that it was Pegasus. I feel myself like I'm naked at the street.
These charges were politicized from the start.
Facts win. Truth wins. Justice wins.
C'est énorme pour moi d'être là, d'être libre, surtout que je ne m'y attendais pas du tout.
Stand with a free press.
Stand with journalists whose reporting won't be silenced. Press freedom is your freedom.
exposing the motives and agenda of the world's most powerful. Unleashed. This is Unleashed with Mark Morano on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back to Unleashed. I'm Mark Morano. We're continuing with Denzil Wessels of Dymium about artificial intelligence. Okay, I'm looking at a report right now, the World Economic Forum's meeting in Davos, and they have a report out 2 days ago which says WEF report ranks artificial intelligence risks ahead of armed conflict and disasters. What are they worried about there? I don't know if you've seen that specific report, but why are these major organizations saying AI is going to be the most dangerous thing, more dangerous than war and disasters?
Yeah, great question, Mark. If we think about it, going back to the models are as good as the data that it's fed. And one of the things that actually happens is when you ask questions of AI, it can actually even drift the models over time. And so if we think about that, once we start, connecting AI to, to the battlefield, to weapons, to equipment, et cetera, what is the risk of AI making the wrong call? Because it can do it a lot faster than we can. And,
right.
How do we actually control that? But and if we think about it, it's more than even just, weapon system controls, et cetera. If it hallucinates the wrong things and it's giving the wrong answer, it can affect a lot of things, all the way down to if people are looking up information about candidates, let's say for the upcoming election that's coming next, is it giving the correct answer? Is it swaying people? Is there a cognitive bias inside the model that is sending people the wrong way when they ask questions? I think there's still a lot of risks that we're even learning about.
Well, on the same token, Klaus Schwab was with the co-founder of Google, Sergio. What's his last name? Sergio, the co-founder of Google, at a World Economic Forum, talked about within 5 years people having a brain implant where we'll know what the audience is thinking. We'll be able to tell their thoughts. We'll be able to know, what they're going to like and what their dislikes are. Is that really a possibility, at least on that time scale, or a possibility ever? Are they going to have brain implants that they'll be able to read our thoughts and emotions, or do they have it already? I should ask.
Well, I mean, if you look at what Musk is doing with Neuralink, they're working on the brain connection to the computer, right? So there's obviously work going on in that space. I actually even have a personal relationship to that story. I used to do a lot of deep diving, and my dive partner was at one of the universities, and he was studying brainwave analysis to recognize human speech. So if you think about that, maybe you don't even need a chip. Maybe they're just listening to your brain waves coming out there to make determinations. Given enough data, AI can figure out a lot of patterns, and maybe those patterns could even be brainwave too. So I would say, I don't even know if it needs an implant.
Well, here's a question. Is the original lie detector test, is that a version of AI that the CIA or anyone who tries to pass a lie detector, isn't that a form? It's trying to read your emotions and using algorithms very similar?
To a certain degree, it's us interpreting those like galvanic skin response and everything. We know that we get certain responses if there's inaccuracies in data. But going back to even the lie detector, when people are trying to figure out the baseline of someone, they ask a few control questions to establish the data, the baseline with data. So if that data is skewed, if the baseline is skewed, the lie detector, results are not going to be as accurate as well. So there is a corollary to AI. I would say it's different to AI, but the same thing of it being based on data and the accuracy being based on data, I think it had some similar problems.
There was a show, again, another TV show reference. I think it was Eureka, it was called, from Eureka, California. But anyway, it was a sort of a sci-fi show, but one of the characters dies and they live on as an AI creature inside of a hard drive of a computer, which they then project, sort of a la, Star Wars, a fake person. But I know there was actually a movement of people who believe that we can transfer a human life into sort of the hard drive of a computer or the cloud, and you can have the essence of that person. It's a very, it's a religious thing. Have you heard of that? Is that actually part of AI, or is that a fringe thing, or is that a mainstream thing?
Look, think neural networks and, the way our brain works is very similar. At least we believe it is. I think we're still learning about it. There's still a lot we don't understand. But, there are people that are even working on something even similar. Let's say the first phase of that is, what about if we collect all of your social media, interactions, your email, et cetera, and we understand the patterns of how you respond to things. In theory, you can create a chatbot, which is a form of AI that says, you can ask a question and it's going to respond how you would typically respond. Now, it hasn't scanned your brain. It's just looked at outputs of your, that you've put all over the place, and it's using that as the patterns to follow. So, I mean, it's conceivable that we'll go down that road, and the more data that we can collect on someone's mind and their interactions, I think the more accurate those models are going to be. So I think it's a possibility.
Okay, now looking at AI, there's always, as a scientist, as researcher, as technology innovators, you can always say, well, can we do something? The next question would be, should we do it? In the area of AI, what can we do that we probably shouldn't do, in your view? Like, where does it get too far? Where does it get down a slippery slope, invasion of the body snatcher style overtaking of society? Where you have, they were sort of AI clones. If you go back to that, I don't know why I'm making all the movie and TV references today, but what can we do that we probably shouldn't be doing? Is there limits to where you think research, or not necessarily research, but policy and turning this into action should be, restricted?
Yeah, look, I think we want to continue the research side and, understand and use AI. Definitely the adoption of it. Like I said, 80% acceleration in companies' productivity. I think we really want to use it. Now, what things shouldn't we do? I don't think we want to be giving it the ability to make, life or death decisions yet, for individuals, and give it, the means to control that. Because again, we know there's problems. We know it can hallucinate things. We know there can be problems with the data it's fed. So we have to be very, very cautious. And I would say that, for very, very sensitive systems as well, maybe we don't want to give AI all of the data. Maybe we want to keep it at arm's length for a certain time. So I think things that we should do is we need to select certain things, certain areas of our data to say, hey, this isn't going to go into a neural network with AI. We're going to keep this kind of isolated. And maybe we give it, a synthetic repository that represents something like the data we want it to learn off of, but we don't want to tell it everything. So I think we're going to want to more safeguard data, if you will.
Well, that's the question is, with all of this data collection, say someone wanted to establish a technocracy or a sort of biosecurity state, a dystopian future, it seems like AI walks us closer and closer to that possible dystopian future. What reforms, deeper reforms, can we do to prevent this? I know, there's, I think it was Yuval Harari, the World Economic Forum advisor, who basically says that artificial intelligence could be taking over for humans, and we're going to have what he called useless eaters. And in order to mollify the public, who are no longer going to be as valuable as sort of a replacement AI, he's recommending sort of psychotropic drugs and computer games to keep everyone docile and preoccupied. How do you avoid that future? I mean, in a more concrete way, is there anything we can do to try to prevent that?
Yeah, look, I think we need to be cautious, and going back even to that student example with college kids or high school kids using generative AI. I think we need to make sure that people are keeping the ability to think and are using their own minds with results coming out of AI. I think there's no substitute for the human mind yet. Maybe it'll come down the road, but it's very easy for us to distinguish what is good and what is bad, what is erroneous, what's correct. And AI is still learning that, and we're still understanding how AI will learn that too. So I think we want to, make sure that even though people are using it, it's not just blind usage, like that law example that I was talking about. We want to make sure that, people are intelligently using it. And to your point, understanding the risks that are associated with it too, because, it's not just like going to Google and typing a search query and getting a result. There's more that's happening behind.
Well, in our society today, we have during COVID lockdowns and you had the vaccine mandates, you had, and now there's talk of a central bank digital currency that would sort of be tied to a social credit system. A lot of this is data, which seems to be the basis of AI. As a, someone in the technology sector, does it trouble you just the overwhelming amount of information constantly collected on every individual purchase, every individual website, every individual action? And how can that, does it worry about how that can be misused in that setting?
That is probably one of my biggest personal fears. And that's actually one of the reasons that Dymium, our company, exists. It's about safeguarding data. And, we need to make sure that we're honoring data privacy for organizations and for individuals. One thing that's been great seeing happen over the last, 2 decades is, privacy regulations have, been increasing over the time. And we need to make sure that that continues. And we have to figure out where people can opt out of their data being leveraged inside of AI as well. Because, I may say that, hey, everything about me, I want to keep private. There was an example, maybe about a decade ago when kind of the Nest thermostats first came out, right? They're kind of cool, smart, connected thermostats. Well, bad guys figured out that they could use the data that says if people were away or not. They were using that for home robberies. So that, again, small piece of data, just are people away or not? And bad guys figured out that they could leverage that. And that's just one piece of data. So think about all the data that you leave behind on a daily basis, emails you send, messages you send the outside world, just the fact of, turning on and off your alarm code, all that's data that can be leveraged against you. So I think it should be a fundamental human right to say that I don't want to have my data used. I want to keep it private.
Wow. Now, you mentioned Elon Musk earlier. Tell us a little bit about his Neuralink. I think it's meant mostly for it's for either paralyzed people to actually move limbs potentially, or is it for some people's brain damage? To explain what his research is and what he's trying to accomplish.
Yeah, obviously, that's not my field of expertise, but, if we look at what they're trying to do, they're trying to make the ability for, the mind to work with the computer directly to kind of skip the other input devices. So, obviously, if it's for disabled people, if it's for just the ability to interact at a different level with a computing device, I think there's a lot of, really cool and interesting possibilities around it. So it's, I think time will tell where it kind of ends up. But I know there's a few different angles that the technology is interesting for sure.
So this again gets to the realm of science fiction. It's possible, at least the people who are researching this and pushing it probably believe that you can transfer a human being into a computer. And I know there is a movement like that, but that's where you're getting into the realm where I think that would freak people out. And of course, that turns into almost a religious thing where your soul could live eternally in a computer, which a lot of people would not accept that, but it's fascinating stuff. So just as a summary here, where do you think we're going to be 10, 20, 30 years down the road with AI? Are we going to, it seems like we don't really, let me put it simply. It seems like if government, for purposes of power and control, can harness any technology, they always use it for more power and control. So when I look at AI, that's my number one issue. I look at it like that. How do you prevent that from governments and from big tech corporate collusion? I mean, because remember, there's been many people, especially after COVID, which went on, the lockdowns, was emergency declared, no one could vote for it, where they said we no longer need barbed wire fences and prisons and watchtowers with guards with machine guns because of our data information, because of our technology today. You can deplatform, cancel, silence, censor someone, take away access to their own bank account if you don't like their politics. And that's what central bank digital currency is about. And I see that working hand in hand with AI. So I see this as a very dangerous threat as that. But how do you see it coming? And again, how do you prevent that government? We only have about a minute left, or less than a minute.
Yeah, that one make your final
comment. Yeah.
That one really does scare me. And like I said, I think it really comes back to what information is shared, what is governed, what's programmatically fed into these models. Again, AI is fast. It can respond very quickly. So I think, guarding the right information so that it doesn't go into the models, I think is probably the one protection that we have today.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. This has been Denzil Wessels of Dymium talking about AI. Thank you for joining Unleashed today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right. And we will see you later this week. We're going to be back, and we'll hopefully have some reports on the Michael Mann, Mark Stein trial in Washington, D.C., the climate trial of the century. Unleashed with Mark Morano. Thank you for watching.